this is Beth from Around the Table Yarns. Tonight is the first night of Sweater Club for the REN Pullover designed by the Woolfolk design team. I'm going to show you a photo of the sweater. So this is our pattern that we're using. We have a couple of different images of it from the design team. It is a pattern that uses 3 different weights of yarn. This is probably the fingering weight. This is probably the worsted weight. And then I'm quite sure that this is the super bulky weight. I don't know of anybody who's doing it in the super bulky. Most of us, I think, are playing around with one of these 2 weights. So I just want to talk a little bit about gauge and finding gauge and what this pattern is calling for. And I'm going to borrow my gauge swatch from last time because I'm not entirely sure where my gauge swatch from this time went to. But a gauge swatch is a way for you to evaluate the size of your stitches and to use that to make a sweater that fits you the most accurately, they're the best. A sweater is a sweater that you hand knit. You are creating the textile as you go. And if you want it to fit you in a certain way, then you need to have, you need to know how big your stitches are or how small your stitches are and what size, what measurement you want the sweater to be. This sweater has a very simple shape. I'm going to just show you. It's really essentially it's essentially this. Not to scale. And then there's a little bit of shaping at the shoulders. And it comes up into a mock neck like that. So there's not really a straight line here. It comes up a little bit over. So this is a straight up and down line on both sides. And there is ribbing at the base of it. And they have about 1.5 inches of ribbing here. And then for all sizes, they do 13.5 inches to the beginning of the armhole. And then this measurement from the top, the bottom of the armhole up to the top is where there's a size variation. And that variation on the smallest size is like 7 inches. On the largest size, it's like 9 inches. This measurement is the measurement around for all the different sizes. And up here, it's about 1.5 inches again, roughly, from the top of the shoulder to the top of the neck. Both of the smaller sizes have a built-in neckline like this, and the front and the back are exactly the same. So this is very close to a pure rectangle. We're going to be casting on 1 number here, working in ribbing on, so this first 1.5 inches, we're going to be working on smaller needles. And then we're going to change at this point to larger needles. When we reach the point where we want to start our armhole shaping, and that could be at 13.5 total, or if you want to make it shorter or longer, we can change this number. But there's just going to be an addition of 2 or 3 stitches cast on at the beginning of this row and then this row to create that armhole shaping. So it's not even that deep an armhole. It's really just a little tiny smidge. And then you work straight up. And at that point, it's just a T. When we get to the top of the armhole shaping, though, we're going to do short rows And I'm going to actually suggest that we do German short rows, but these short rows look like this, and it creates that lovely sloped shoulder. And then you put these stitches on a holder and these stitches on a holder, and you work again on the smaller needle. So right here, again, it's the smaller needle. And you work for a couple of rows, I think it's like 4 rows with some decreases, and then you increase and you bind off, and this is actually going to be folded, so it's a folded neckline when we're done with it. So the neckline is not ribbed, it is done in stockinette stitch. So I'm just going to put that up here, the whole thing except for the bottom ribbing. So this is ribbing down here, but all the rest of it is stockinette stitch. So it's a very straightforward pattern. We're going to have the same number here. So we're not going to change numbers from the ribbing to the body, but we are going to change needles. So the ribbing will look like it comes in a little bit because of the needle change. This length is something that can be easily altered if you want to make it longer or shorter. And this width is easily altered if you want to make it wider or narrower. So I want to talk a little bit about ease, and we've talked about ease before. If something fits, if I fit exactly around, you know, if you measured me and my measurement was exactly around here, I would have 0 ease. No ease. So that fits exactly. Negative ease is tight, tighter than the body. A good example of something that has negative ease is a bathing suit or a tube top. How about a tube top? A tube top has to be smaller than you so that it stays up. Positive ease means that it fits loosely. It has extra fabric around. So many times when we make a sweater that's going to go over a t-shirt or a turtleneck, we're looking for something that fits loosely. But how loose do you want it to be? And that's actually up to the person who you're making it for. If it's you, and I do recommend if this is your first time doing it, that you make a sweater for yourself because you will be the most accessible model. Positive ease for an outer garment, I think, should be around 4 to 6 inches. In other words, the measurement around the person is 4 to 6 inches less than the actual measurement around the sweater. So, for example, if this sweater were 20 inches across the bottom, and that would be the same measurement for under the arms, that would give you a total circumference of 40 inches. So this would fit somebody with 4 to 6 inches of ease if their actual measurements were 34 to 36 inches around. That would have 4 to 6 inches of positive ease. If they were actually 40 inches around, they would have no ease. And if they were 42 or more, they would have negative ease. So when we talk about ease, That's what we're talking about, how something fits, whether or not your body is right at the sides of the sweater, or whether you're somewhere inside of it, or you're outside of it and it fits you snugly. This is not a pattern that I would suggest doing negative ease. This is not something that you want to fit like a tube top. This is meant to be a sweatshirt style pullover and not something that is closely fitting. Okay, so how do we go about fitting this? I worked with the class this morning and everybody had read the pattern. They were really good. They'd gone to the website and they pulled the pattern, they bought the pattern and they'd read their pattern and they decided on their yarn and they'd done a swatch and they came in, they're like, okay, so I'm going to do this size. And they were really surprised when we worked out a little bit of measuring on themselves and on sweaters that they tried on, and it turned out that they were going to do a different size than the one that they'd originally picked. So I just want to talk a little bit about how we go from this part to finding the actual size that we're going to do. So I'm going to keep this close by in case we want to look at it again. And let's look at my swatch. And you're going to want to start with the yarn that you're going to make this out of. So you've picked this pattern and you're picking a yarn, and the different gauges of yarn are 24 stitches equals 4 inches, or 18 stitches equals 4 inches, or 9 stitches equals 4 inches. And I'm going to concentrate on these two. I don't have anybody that I know is doing the super bulky, so we're going to concentrate on the top two, but the same kind of numbers apply. So here is my swatch, and this is very similar to a lot of the swatches that I saw today. This swatch is exactly, I love this ruler. It's got the 16ths on it. This swatch is 4 3/16. So the measurement of my swatch is 4 3/16 inches, which equals right. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm sorry. That's 4 5/16. Pardon me. Now, I generally try and go to the nearest 1/8 of an inch, but I have this fabulous ruler that lets me see that it's 5/16. So what does that mean? 5 divided by 16 is 0.3125. So I have 4.3125 inches across my swatch. So I take that, I take the number of stitches, and it should be 20, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 21. Okay, so I have 21 stitches by 21 stitches. So the number of stitches by the number of inches. So we're going to divide the number of stitches, stitches per inch means 21 stitches divided by 4.3125. And my total, I'm going to round to the 10th, equals 4.87 stitches per inch. That's my gauge. That's the best estimate of my gauge from this swatch. Okay, so what we did was we have 21 stitches across. We have an exact measurement, or as exact a measurement as we can get. To the nearest 1/8 of an inch is okay. This happened to be to the nearest 1/16 of an inch. And then I took the total number of stitches and I divided it by the actual measurement to get my actual gauge of this swatch. So I took a sweater that fit me well. And I measured from here to here because on me, this is the measurement that I need to match. And I wanted to make this a bigger sweater, so I picked a large sweater, an oversized sweater, because I like the way my oversized sweater measured. So you could do that. You could take a sweater, so whatever this measurement is, if it's a sweater that fits you well, that you want to replicate the fit of, you could just measure from the armhole to the other armhole and come up with that number in inches. Another thing you could do is you could measure yourself. So here's me. And I'm going to measure around my widest part, which is around the bustiest part of my bust. And that is my actual measurement. And I could add ease to that. So this measurement already has the ease built in. And it's already the kind of ease I want. So this is a favorite sweater. And this ease is already built in. So you could take the measurements off of a favorite sweater or top and check what the width is, and that could be your inches. So I would, let's say this was, my actual measurement around is 45, and my sweater was, I'm going to say that it was 52 inches or 26 inches across, which was 52 inches around. So I like an ease of about 7 inches total. So what do? I take this measurement here, 4.87 stitches equals 1 inch to the inch, 1 inch. And I multiply it by the number of inches that I want. And that comes out to 253. That's my total circumference. We're doing this in parts, so I only need half of that. Equals 126. I'm going to round up. I'm going to say 127. So we don't show the patterns on here, so I'm not going to show you the pattern, but I'm going to go to the pattern and I'm going to look for one that has the closest to my number. And that would actually be, so there's 3 versions. There's the snow, which is the one that you have the first instructions for, the snow, the tauve, and the hygge. And the second tauve is the closest to 127 stitches. So if I were using this yarn and I wanted it to fit this size, I would pick the second size under the snow, the smaller, the 24 stitch to 4 inches. Now notice that is not the gauge I got. I didn't get 6 stitches to the inch. I got almost 5 stitches to the inch. But because this is the size that I want, this is the size I'm going to make. The second size under the snow is almost exactly the same as that. So that's the size I'm going to pick. And I'm going to estimate my yarn based on how much yardage for that size. I'm not going to look at the weight. I'm just going to look at the yardage. So if this size called for 1,400 yards, I'm going to make sure that I have 1,400 yards in my ready to make this project. Now, if I'm planning to make it shorter or longer, I want to alternate how much yarn. So how much yarn depends on whether you're going to do anything longer. Like let's say this measurement on my favorite sweater was 15 inches. So that's longer than the REN sweater calls for by 1.5 inches. So I would be adding to it. So you'll want to make sure that you overestimate or you have additional yarn if you're planning to make the length of the sweater more from the armhole down than the 13.5 that's written. So again, we're looking at this is a schematic of the sweater. And I made up this number, but here you've got 13.5 from here to the base. That's the same for all the sizes. And then there's varying numbers for here. So when you're measuring your sweater, your favorite sweater, you want to measure here down and compare that measurement. Compare to the schematic of the pattern, because that's the closest to this measurement here. Doesn't that look messy? I hope you guys are following along okay. So let's just do sort of another example. Let's say that your measurement across was 36 inches on your favorite. Sorry, 36 around, so 18 inches across. And let's say you were using a thicker yarn and you measured your swatch, you did your swatch and you measured your swatch and you got, 5 inches across. So your actual measurement, let's say you had 20 stitches or 24 stitches and it was 5 inches across. That's going to give you a gauge of, wake up, 24 divided by 5 is a gauge of 4.8. So we're in the same ballpark. You would multiply your actual gauge by the actual measurement that you want to get. And that would come out to 86.4 total stitches. So then I would look in the different sizes, and the first size under the tove is closest to 86. So that's the one I would follow. So there was some confusion in the class this morning because the pattern is written for their gauge. So the pattern is specifically for 5.5 stitches per inch, I believe. Look, double checking. Sorry, 6 stitches. What? 6 stitches per inch? Or 4.5 stitches per inch? Or 2.25. So if you don't have one of these gauges on your swatch, we need to do a little alteration. We need to do a little figuring. Is there anybody on tonight that has a different gauge for their swatch? Hi, Paula. So Paula, what's the measurement of your swatch?
4.25.
And how many?
No,
how many,
sorry, 5.25.
okay, how many
20,
stitches did you cast on?
23.
23 stitches divided by 5.25 inches.
Right.
Stitches, okay. That's where you can see it. 23 divided by 5.25 gives you 4.38 stitches per inch.
Right.
Okay, and what measurement around do you want your sweater to be?
I want it to be 42, which is size 2.
So 42 inches around times 4.38 is
184.
Right? And we're going to divide that in half.
Mm-hmm.
So is 184 and then divided in half because we're doing the front and the back separately. So 92 front or back.
Right. Right.
Okay. So does that match up with the second size?
Not exactly. No, they suggest casting on 94.
So it's close enough.
All right.
There will be a stitch in the seam. So you're very, very close. So you could, your stitches are a little bit bigger. So your final garment will be a little bit bigger than 42 inches.
That's
right?
Okay. Yeah.
So if you do 94.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 94.
94 times 2 divided by your actual gauge, yours will be closer to 43 inches around.
That's fine.
Okay. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for something to be, it's not a close fitting, tight fitting thing. So we can have a little bit of play here, but what you're looking for is something that's in the ballpark of your size. So for you, that would be size number 2 in the middle gauge.
Right.
Okay. Now, having said that, if you are picking a size, so Paula is a tiny person. She might not normally do a small. She might normally do an extra small. So if you are sizing, like if your size, if there's a small, I'm sorry, extra small, small, medium, large, extra large, and then they usually have an extra, extra large. So if you're following this, if your actual size is this one, but your stitch number has you doing this one, is it going to work?
No.
Yes, it will.
Oh.
It will. So let's say that your gauge was so cattywampus that you matched here and not here.
Okay.
Right? You would follow all of the stitch instructions like cast on this many stitches, bind off this many stitches, add this many stitches. You would follow all of the stitch instructions for the extra large, but you would follow all of the inch measurements for your size. In other words, again, here's our sweater. This measurement is different for a small versus an extra large, right? You would want to use the small size measurement for the length. And that generally will work out. The biggest problem will be in the slope of the sleeves, but usually there's a little bit of play at the top of the sleeve where you've done all of your increasing and it just goes straight into the armhole. So there's usually some room to play with this. And if your gauge was significantly different than the gauge of the sweater, like if you were 21 stitches to 4 inches, and so you were just nowhere near any of these gauges, then we might want to make sure we swatched a little bit or checked a little bit on the decreases or the increases, sorry, for the sleeve. In this case, though, I think we're good. I think you're so close. 4.38 is so close to 4.5 that, you know, your final measurement is going to be almost 42 inches around. And it was interesting. We tried on a cotton sweater today and we measured it. And then the person who brought it tried it on. And then the woman next to her is about the same size. So she tried it on. And then she measured it again. And the sweater had stretched an inch. So things stretch. And both of them liked how it fit. And then she measured it and she was like, but now it's an inch bigger. And I'm like, well, it'll stretch, but you know, it'll go back when it's washed and dried. Okay, so that is really, I think, the critical thing that I wanted people to know about sizing for this. Does anybody have any other questions? Do you want to use yours as an example and have me walk you through yours? Maureen, Laura, or Jennifer? Does that answer questions you have, Paula? Yeah, that affirms.
Yeah, it did. It
So
did.
do you plan on making it the full 13 and a half? Have you measured a sweater of your own up to the armhole?
No, I should though.
So you
Yeah.
might, because you're petite, you might want to shave an inch or two off of that part.
Yes.
So this part of your sweater is the most changeable. It's one big rectangle. If you want to make it longer or shorter, you can.
Yeah, I definitely will, because I'm playing a little bit of yarn chicken here. So if I really don't have enough yarn, I might just put some horizontal stripes, you know, or a big horizontal band of color somewhere.
So we talked about this. We have somebody else who's playing a little bit of yarn chicken. And I just wanted to say, please notice that a sleeve is really this wide.
Oh.
It's not just this wide. It's, you know, the other half of it is folded down on the other side. So 2 sleeves roughly equal a front or a back.
Oh, right.
So both sleeves roughly equal the front or the back. In this pattern, the front and the back are exactly the same and have this mock turtle neck. Okay. So
I can predict, right.
If you are playing yarn chicken, if you finish the back and you still have 2/3 of your yarn left, you should be okay. Okay, so the front plus the back plus 2 sleeves equals 100%
Right.
of your yarn. So it's a third, a third, and a third, or 2/6. 2/6.
Each sleeve is a third or 2 sleeves are a third. Oh, okay, a 6. All right.
That comes out to a sixth of each. So we had somebody who had 3 yarns that she wants to do a fade, and we were trying to figure out the best way to do it. One of them, she had 5 skeins here, 5 skeins here, and 1 skein here. So this one is never going to equal the third. So we divided it into thirds, and she's going to start each piece, the front, the back, and both sleeves. So she divided it into thirds to start each piece, and then she's going to use these as because she's got plenty of the other ones. If you are increasing by an inch or 2, think about adding about 100 yards, roughly, depending on what yarn. But for both of the yarns that we're using, if you're increasing or decreasing by an inch or 2 or an inch, think about that being around 100 yards.
Thanks.
For estimation.
Okay.
But generally speaking, when you're doing a sweater in pieces like this, if you finish the back and you have 2/3 of your yarn amount left, and you can either tell that by counting the skeins or weighing them, then you should have enough to finish. The other thing I want to talk about is the best place to stop and check your gauge. The best place to stop and check your gauge. So this sweater is very, very simple. It is just this rectangle. The best place to stop and check your gauge is when you're about here on the back. So you've done a few inches, you're past the ribbing, you've done a few inches. Stop and check here, because there's no difference between here and here. And make sure that this is within the ballpark. So for you, Paula, we're going to want to see that that's around 21 and a half inches across, because you wanted it to be 42.
Right.
So if it's not 21, hold the phone. Right? If it's bigger than that, then you're making it bigger than you need to. And it's early days enough to go back and start over with fewer stitches. But this is a better estimate. So, I showed you this. This is a great little estimate of my gauge. But my actual gauge is the actual measurement of my sweater with all of the stitches. So that's a better place to check your gauge. So check gauge about 2 or 3 inches above the ribbing. It's a really important place to stop and check. People ask me, because next month is we're starting the back, and we absolutely can start the back next month. I want people to be really, really comfortable with their gauge swatches, and I want you to call or come into the store. Oh, 9, 2,
there we go.
4. So call or come into the store if you have questions about that, and we will talk you through them. If you have measurements and of your swatch or your body or your favorite sweater that you want to talk about, we can talk about them. That's the store number. The other thing we talked about is that not everybody wants to do this neckline. Okay, if you do the top and you don't want to do this neckline, then you're going to want to stop before the mock turtleneck starts. And that is clearly marked in the pattern. So you want to leave all of these stitches. These are all going to be left on holders. And you're going to just want to stop at the end of the paragraph where it says to leave stitches on the holder. And you don't want to change to smaller needles and do this mock neck. When you have this part done, we can then figure out if you want to do a V-neck or a crew neck and write the alteration for your sweater. If you want, I think that the mock turtle is really nice looking and it's very simple. So I think that the mock turtle is worth doing. That's what I'm planning on doing. But
Me
if you
too.
feel really, really strongly about not doing a mock turtleneck and you want a crew neck or a V-neck, then we need to finish the back to here and use that to figure out how, like at what point in your armhole shaping are you going to stop and start shaping the neck? Okay. Oh,
Very
there's so
good.
much writing all over my paper.
Yes. I figured out how to grab your pictures.
Oh, that's awesome.
Oh yeah, it's just a screenshot with an apple.
That's a great.
I
Oh,
never did it before.
oh, I could do that. Yeah, so maybe I'll do that and put it in the
Right.
notes section of the thing. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay. Whoop, I didn't mean to do that. So measure your swatch. So get your yarn, pick a yarn, do a swatch. It should be the way you like it. It doesn't have to be exact. It doesn't have to be 4.5 stitches to an inch. It doesn't have to be 6 stitches to an inch. It has to be the way you like it. And measure the swatch. Find a sweater you like and that you want to be similar in how it fits, and measure the sweater. And we can put together your swatch and your sweater to make this a sweater that fits you exactly the way you want it to.
Wonderful.
So your homework is to go forth and get your gauge swatch and figure out which size you're doing. And if you want to cast on, the ribbing is done 1 needle size smaller than the body. That's not so big. So if you forgot to do that, that's okay. The other thing I want to just mention is that there is a selvage stitch in the pattern. Please note on the wrong side rows, this is done back and forth. There are right side rows, which are all knit, and there are wrong side rows, which are not all purl. Please note that the wrong side rows for the body and for the sleeve section, for the body section that has the armholes, sorry, not the sleeve, the armhole section, have selvage stitches. Please pay attention to that. That will make your sewing up much easier. And since finishing this is going to involve sewing, don't be like Beth and forget to do your selvage stitches until you get to the armholes. Full disclosure. I forgot to do my selvage stitch until I looked at the pattern when I was getting ready, and I was like, oh, look at that. The wrong side rows have selvage stitches. So selvage
sorry.
is one or two stitches at the edge that are treated to be more stable usually. And so in this case, it's a garter stitch edge. And
one stitch, right?
That will make the sewing up much easier if you have a selvage. The other thing I did mean to say, and then I'm done, is if you wanted, some people made the Naima sweater an A-line, which means it was wider at the bottom. I'm going to do it here. So this is the way that our pattern is written. Right? That's essentially how our pattern is written. I think that's probably fine. If you want to make it longer, you can. But in the Naima, we had an option to make it A-line, which means we started wider. I'm not sure that that is going to be the best look for this sweater. But if you would really prefer an A-line, then you could alter the pattern to be A-line. I wouldn't necessarily do this extra thing here. I would just start with the width that you wanted around the hem And then we'd have to figure out with your gauge how to get from this many stitches. So like, let's say this is 8 more stitches than here. Then we'd need to do 8 decreases evenly up. So we need to know the row gauge to be able to do that. So if anybody is working and wants to do an A-line, they need to call me at 230-9224-216-230-9224. And that's for A-line, gauge, neckline, or I don't have any yarn. All righty. As usual, it's been so fun to get started with this today. Does anybody have any questions? Your questions are really helpful for the people at home if you do have any.
I have a comment.
Okay.
And it's just that I have not made a sweater that you sew together for many, many decades. And it's about time in my life to learn the right way.
It is.
So thank you. And I've never done that particular neckline either. And so I may as well do one of those.
I have
So thank you.
I have a number of sweaters who have a similar neckline to this. I think the best picture of it is here. I'll just pull this up. I think this one is probably, I'll spotlight it again. So you can see it sort of folds in. It's just a little bit shaped on the edge. So it folds in at the edge, it shapes in and then it shapes out again. And that when you fold it, you get this nice rounded collar. It's very smooth looking around the neck and it's not a rib. So it won't be tight around the neck. It is done on the smaller needles. And so I do want to double check it that it fits everybody well, that it fits around your big old heads. So that'll be next.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Okay, so it's just about 7 o'clock. This has been a great session. We meet again in August. I want to say I know the date, but I don't know the date off the top of my head. I'm pulling it up. The next time we meet is August. I think it's also the 3rd Monday of August. It is the 21st of August. So I hope you guys enjoy this. And if you have any questions, feel free to call.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks, Maureen. Laura, Jennifer, any questions at all?
I got time.
I just want to add, because the question came up, if you work all the way up to the short rows, that I prefer the German short row to the wrap and turn, which means you go 1 stitch further. So they say go to, I think it's like, I'm going to make up a number, go to 10 stitches before the end. You would go to 9 stitches before the end. You would go plus 1 closer to the end, 1 further than you were to do a German short row. And when you do the German short row, what you can do is there's so many rows in the pattern that are German short rows, you could place a removable marker or a marker where the short rows are supposed to happen. So to keep track of them, you could work to the last marker and turn and work to and remove the marker and come back, work to the last marker and turn and remove the marker. And then you'd go to the one in and then you'd come back to the next one. And so that's how I did it. And it was really like a no-brainer because I could see how many markers I had to do. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So so there were, however many markers. So let's say I had to do 4 turns on each side. I placed my markers, they were removable safety pin type on each side, and I worked to the last one, did my turn, a German short row turn, and took the marker out. Worked to the last one on the other side, did my turn, took the marker out. Back to the last one, which is now shorter by however many stitches. Took it out so that I'm not leaving them in. I'm not going to go back to that same marker. And
Right.
that gave me exactly my short rows. And it was like a little bit of extra, counting up front. And I didn't have to count at all doing the short rows.
Nice.
So
Very nice.
that's my short row tip. And again, I would do the German short row, which I will demonstrate when we do the back.
Yeah. There's time. There's time.
There's so much time. You could stop at the top of the sleeves and start the other piece. Just stick it on a barber cord or a piece of scrap yarn.
And that's what I had planned on doing. I have an extra set of the size needles, so
okay. Yeah.
It's
you
good.
don't even need extra needles. You could just stick it on scrap yarn.
Yep. I have
Okay.
I have plenty of that too.
I don't know where you get extra yarn.
I don't know. I have no, I think somebody can hook me up.
I think we can. All right. That was perfect. Thank you. That was the other piece of information for tonight. You guys have a great month. Hopefully I'll see you before then.
Cool.
August 21st. Good night.
Night.
Bye, thank you.